I remember that day mostly because it felt so ordinary. Nothing about it stood out at all. I came home from work the way I always did. There was no rush, no tension, no feeling that anything was wrong. I dropped my things, walked into the kitchen, and made myself a sandwich. And then, as I swallowed, I coughed. Just once at first, then again. And that's when I saw the blood. It was bright red, not dark, not streaked, bright. It landed on the sandwich, and for a second I just stared at it, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Every time I coughed, more came up. My plate started filling. I stood up to walk toward the sitting room and felt lightheaded, like my body was already giving up before my mind caught up. I tried to stay calm. I told myself to stay calm. I grabbed my phone and called my ex-wife. She's a nurse. I remember thinking that she would know what to do. When she answered, I tried to speak, but I coughed again, and blood went all over the phone. I heard her voice change immediately. She told me not to lie down. I remember saying I was tired, that I didn't feel good, that I just needed to lie down for a minute. She told me again not to. I remember feeling annoyed, more than scared, like I didn't have the energy to argue. My chest felt tight. Every breath felt thinner than the last. I told her I was going to lie down anyway. That decision felt small at the time. It's strange, looking back, how ordinary everything still felt. The room, the light, the sound of my own breathing. And then there was a gap. Not darkness, not fading, just nothing. The next thing I remember, I was somewhere else. When I came back into awareness, I didn't know where I was. It was dark. Not night dark, but dim, controlled. The first thing I noticed was that I couldn't move. My hands were strapped down. My feet were strapped down. I tried to shift, and pain flooded in immediately, the kind that doesn't spike and fade, just pressure, crushing, relentless. I became aware of tubes, one down my throat, something in my neck, something in my nose. I tried to speak and realized I couldn't. I couldn't follow conversations. I couldn't ask questions. I couldn't even tell them I was awake. As soon as I could focus my eyes, I looked to the left. There was a TV mounted on the wall, and beside it, I became aware of someone standing there. I couldn't see a body. I couldn't make out a face. There was no outline, no shadow. But I could feel it, as clearly as I could feel the restraints on my wrists, as clearly as I could feel the bed under me. I remember trying to understand how that was possible. I remember wondering if it was a doctor or a nurse or something my mind was creating because of the pain. But it didn't feel imagined. It didn't flicker or fade. It stayed. Time stopped behaving normally. I don't know how long I was in that room. Days blurred together. Nights meant nothing. At some point, I realized I was losing weight rapidly. My body felt hollowed out, like it was consuming itself just to stay alive. The presence stayed through it all. Even the nurses would ask if I wanted it turned on. I couldn't respond. I couldn't tell them why I kept staring at that exact spot. I mean, how do you explain that someone is standing there when there's no one to point to? Eventually, one day, I woke up and the room was empty. No nurses, no doctors, and no presence. That was when I realized how alone I actually was. The lights were low. The TV was still there on the wall to my left, dark and silent. I tried to move and realized how weak I was. My arms shook when I pushed myself up even slightly. My whole body trembled, like it was running on whatever was left. I lay there staring at the TV, trying to hold myself together. I remember thinking that if I closed my eyes, I might not open them again. That thought didn't feel dramatic. It felt practical. And that was when I cried out. I remember saying God's name without thinking about it. I remember asking not to die. I remember asking to see my children again. I remember apologizing for leaving, for shutting the door for so long. There was no speech, no reasoning, just need. And in the middle of that, something shifted. I didn't feel myself leave my body. There was no pulling sensation, no movement. One moment I was on the bed, and the next I was at the ceiling, looking down. I could see everything, not just in front of me, all around. There was no single direction my attention was coming from. I could see my body lying there. I could see the equipment. I could see the nurses moving in the hallway beyond the room. I could see through the walls. Outside the building there was a field. I could see every blade of grass. Not as a blur, not as a mass, but individually. I could see the veins running through them, the edges, the way they moved. The colors weren't static. They flowed, shifted, like the world was alive in a way I had never noticed before. I remember realizing I wasn't afraid. The pain was gone. The effort was gone. And whatever was happening, it felt like it was already in motion before I noticed it. And then, without effort, without motion, I became aware of something else entirely, something I can only describe as a presence of light. I don't remember moving toward it. If there was distance, it didn't feel like travel. One moment I was aware of the room, the next, that awareness gave way to something else, something brighter, but not in a way that hurt or overwhelmed my senses. It wasn't a light I was looking at. It was a light I was inside. I struggle to describe it clearly, even now. Not because it was vague, but because it didn't behave like anything I've experienced here. There was no source, no direction. It wasn't shining from somewhere. It simply was, and everything existed within it. The first thing I noticed was the absence of pain. Not relief from pain, absence, as if pain had never applied to me in the first place. My body wasn't gone exactly, it just wasn't relevant. What remained was awareness, intact and unmistakably me. And then there was love. Not emotional love, not affection, not warmth. This felt structural, like the underlying condition of everything. It wasn't directed at me, it included me. At some point, and I can't say when, I realized I was being held. There weren't arms the way we think of arms, but the sense of being supported was undeniable, secure, intentional. I didn't question it. I didn't wonder who it was. I knew. To me, it was God. I remember thinking, I'm home. Time didn't behave normally there. I can't tell you how long I was in that state. It could have been seconds, it could have been much longer. I remember having the sense of knowing everything and nothing at the same time. Everything felt complete. At some point, another presence appeared. I don't remember seeing a face clearly. I don't remember features, but the recognition was immediate, just as immediate as before. I knew it was Jesus. Again, there were no words exchanged, no message delivered, no instruction. Just presence. Just love layered onto love. I remember being aware that this was perfection, not in the sense of flawlessness, but in the sense that nothing needed to be added or corrected. Then, just as gently as everything had unfolded, it began to shift. I felt hands, though not physical ones at first, guiding what I understood as myself. There was no resistance, no fear, just a sense that something was changing. I remember feeling reluctant, not afraid, just unwilling to leave. The next sensation was weight, physical weight. I felt myself being pressed back into something solid. Then hands again, this time unmistakably human, on my body. And then the light faded. Not abruptly, just out of reach. The last clear thing I remember before everything went dark was the feeling that something precious had been set down carefully, rather than taken away. I woke up again to voices, urgent ones, hands on my shoulders, someone calling my name. I opened my eyes and the room rushed back in all at once, bright and crowded and loud in a way that felt wrong. The first thing I did, without thinking, was look to the left. The space beside the TV was empty. Whatever had been there before was gone. That absence hit harder than the pain. I remember feeling a sudden fear, not of dying, but of being misunderstood, of saying the wrong thing and watching people look at me differently. I asked for everyone to leave the room. I didn't want medication. I didn't want explanations. I needed quiet. Later, I learned what had happened to my body. Tumors in my lungs had ruptured. Blood had filled them. They told me my cause of death was acute respiratory failure, hypoxia. I had suffocated. They had drained liters of blood from my lungs. Hearing it explained medically didn't contradict what I remembered, but it didn't really touch it either. Going home was harder than I expected. I wasn't ready. I could barely take care of myself. Everything felt louder, heavier. The world felt sharp in places it hadn't before. After what I experienced, being back in a body felt restrictive, like wearing something that didn't quite fit anymore. I became depressed. The love I remembered didn't exist here in the same way. I felt other people's anger, their pain, their frustration, and it overwhelmed me. I remember thinking that something about this world felt backwards. Not wrong, just reversed. Like we focus on the least important things and miss what actually matters. I can't explain that feeling cleanly, and I don't try to anymore. I don't talk about what happened often. Not because I doubt it, but because I know how it sounds. I live with the uncertainty of it, with the memory of it, with the quiet awareness that whatever I touched there hasn't left me completely, even if I can't reach it the same way. I'm still here, still trying to figure out how to live after remembering something I can't fully put into words.